Well, it's a full moon tonight, and I haven't turned into a werewolf, so I guess I've got that going for me. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I'd recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good overview or sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus, which is we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre and explore them. But that's not what's happening in this video, because this is our annual Franchise Essentials series, and that's what we're calling it. I've had a few years now where I haven't really had a full final title for it. Franchise Essentials, that's what we're talking about. And what we are talking about is a particular horror franchise, something that we touched on in the horror movie syllabus previously, something that made the syllabus usually for the first entry in the series. And then we talked a little bit about the series on the syllabus, but now we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. We're going to look at each movie a little bit more individually and talk about which ones are essential viewing and frankly, which ones are skippable, which ones you don't need to see for your edification of that franchise. And the franchise that we're looking at today is The Howling, and this was voted on by you guys. I've been lately letting you guys vote on which series I tackle each year. I usually do a marathon of them, and then I do this essentials video. And you guys chose the Howling, and that's cool because I hadn't seen all of the entries in this franchise. I'd seen about half of them. And so it was a fun experience to be able to go in and check out what I hadn't seen, because my attitude about this series was that it would get progressively worse, but that's not actually the case. It was kind of up and down, and there was some gems that I didn't realize was going to be there, which is going to make it a little interesting for us to talk about which one of these are essential and which ones aren't, because it's not really so much about what I liked and didn't like, but what you need or don't need to see for the franchise. But this one's a little bit more challenging because this franchise is largely not a continuous story. It's kind of almost anthology style, and each thing's about a werewolf, but it's not necessarily tied into the previous movies, with a couple of exceptions that we'll get into. But so it's harder to say which is essential and what's not for the franchise in terms of the story. So we're going to look at it a little bit more in terms of what's essential viewing in order to appreciate or enjoy the franchise in general. So that's the focus I'm going to have on this, which is going to honestly kind of dovetail into which ones I liked and which ones I didn't like so much. So that's kind of the tack I'm taking with it. And so we are going to go ahead and get started and looking into which is essential and which not right now. The first movie that we're talking about is, of course, the original movie, The Howling. And this is the movie that was on the horror movie syllabus. We talked about this, so it was syllabus worthy. So that's kind of going to give you a hint of where we're going with this here. But it is an important movie. It unfortunately came out the same year as An American Werewolf in London, which is arguably the better film of the 2 werewolf movies. And I think that's true too. But it shouldn't overshadow how good and how important The Howling is. Not unlike An American Werewolf in London, The Howling has an incredible werewolf transformation scene. Again, it gets overshadowed by Werewolf in London, but it is pretty exceptional in its own right. And there's a fun story about the 2 makeup artists, Rick Baker and Rob Bottin. I told that in the werewolves video that we did that talked about The Howling, and it's worth a check out to see because that's a really fun story. But outside of the transformation, it's really got a lot going for it too. It's got a star in Dee Wallace, who is a bona fide scream queen, and she's great in this movie. It's got a really cool concept, this idea of the colony, this group of people that may or may not be werewolves, and it's really working in some cool lore and mythology while also working in some personal drama. And it's got a very memorable ending that I think is pretty fun and kind of reminiscent of Halloween 3 in a way, but it's really pretty outstanding. And I think that this one is definitely essential viewing. This is, again, a syllabus worthy movie that is arguably a horror classic. I would call it a horror classic. So this one definitely must see viewing. Okay, so next on our list is Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, which is a pretty fun title. And this is a pretty fun film, but only in a so bad it's good kind of way. It's not a very quality movie, despite the presence of Christopher Lee, who's pretty much slumming it here. And he's not really terribly happy to be there, and you can kind of tell in his performance. And it's because he's surrounded by some pretty bad actors. He's also got Sybil Danning in there, and that's another credit to the movie. And also, Sybil Danning's breasts are there. Unless you think I'm being a little bit crass, the editors are going to remind you that her breasts are in this movie over and over and over again during the credits. It was a pretty big get, I suppose. But the movie itself is the only one that arguably the only one that really is focused on continuity in this series, as it is a direct pickup, direct sequel to the previous movie. Although the story that it's telling is kind of loosely tied together in the sense that it's making more references rather than returning characters or anything like that. And the movie is really focused more on the mythology of vampires than it is on werewolves. It really kind of seems like it wants to be a vampire movie more, and Christopher Lee's presence kind of leaning towards that way. But this movie is a tough one for me to say whether it's essential or not, because it is technically a continuity of the previous movie, but it also is not very good. But it is enjoyably campy bad, unintentionally campy bad, and you have a good time with it. At least I did. So I'm gonna eke it over to essential viewing, mostly because it is continuity for the series, and because I do have some personal fun with it, but barely. It's barely essential, but I'm gonna call it essential. And now we get to Howling 3, The Marsupials. And this is where we definitely deviate from continuity. This movie basically ignores the previous two movies. Doesn't contradict them necessarily, but doesn't really pay any attention to them. And it's going in its own other direction. And it's a good thing that it is. They've changed location now. It's set in Australia. They're focused on these marsupial style werewolves. And it's a sympathetic look to the werewolves. The werewolves are sympathetic protagonists in this movie, which is an interesting angle, a different shift that makes it feel like a fresh entry in the franchise. It's got some wild effects. The pouch scene, the little baby werewolf going into the pouch, is outstanding. It's pretty wild and gross. And it's not a great movie. It's actually pretty bad, kind of like the previous entry, but it's leaning into the camp aspect to it, where the previous movie tried to take itself seriously. This one knows that it's not serious, and it's leaning squarely into that. It's making fun of itself, and it's winking at itself, which is a really good idea. It makes for the movie to be a lot more of a fun experience, because instead of laughing at the movie, you're kind of laughing with the movie. It knows what it is, and it wants you to have a good time with it. And I do. I have a really good time with this. It's not, again, like tied to the previous entries. It's not something you need to see for continuity, but it is one of the more fun entries in the series. I like it quite a bit, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and say it's essential, because again, I want to focus on the fun movies, the enjoyable movies, rather than so much movies that are tied to continuity, because that's not really going to happen. So this one, if you want to enjoy The Howling, this is one that you should definitely check out. Essential viewing. Okay, let's talk about Howling 4, the original Nightmare. And this one's interesting because it's not really in continuity with the previous movies, and it's trying to readapt the original novel source material that the original movie, the first movie, did try to adapt. And it kind of comes off as an inferior remake of the first movie. Like, supposedly this is a more faithful adaptation. I would quibble with that, but I guess technically it has more elements from the book than the first movie did. But it feels like a lower production value version of the first movie, with worse acting, worse effects, worse script, worse everything. It doesn't look very good. It's kind of hard to watch. The acting is very bland and flat. The werewolf transformation is nowhere near as cool as the one in the first movie. It's nowhere near as effective. It does have some interesting, like, diversions in terms of style, but it's not a particularly interesting transformation. And again, it winds up being kind of a dull slog, because you feel like you've seen this story before, because you have, and it just feels inferior. It feels like a pale imitation of the original. It feels redundant and unnecessary, which equates to a non-essential viewing experience. This one is definitely not one you have to spend your time on, especially if you've seen the original, and you shouldn't spend your time on it because it's not particularly fun. It's boring, unfortunately. So this one, definitely not essential. Okay, now we're at part 5, Howling 5, The Rebirth. Or is it Howling Reborn? I can never remember because there's another movie that has the other title, and I always get them confused. Doesn't really matter. What matters is we've got another fresh start for the franchise. Once again, they're ignoring everything that came before, and they're kind of setting up their own lore, their own rules, their own mythology. And again, to its benefit, it's not feeling bound or constrained by the previous entries in this. And this one's really taking a different approach to it. It's foregoing the kind of creature feature, gory werewolf thing in favor of more of a mystery setup, kind of like a almost like a House on Haunted Hill type setup where a bunch of people are in a mansion and they kind of have to solve this mystery of who's the one killing everybody, and it's a werewolf, but which one of them is it? It's a good setup, and it's got some fun characters. Again, they're caricatures. They're not amazing, but they're fun, and the dialogue is pretty funny, I think. It's not, again, not amazing. It's not an amazing movie, but it's a fresh take on the series and kind of invigorating it, giving it a little bit of new life. It's very light on werewolf action. That is one of the knocks on it I have, is that it doesn't have a whole lot of the werewolf in it, but it's not really trying to focus on it. It's trying to focus on these funny characters and their weird situation and the mystery of it. And the mystery is working pretty well. But mostly what I like about it is it just feels fresh. Once again, it's taking a franchise that you think you know what you're getting and giving you something completely different. And I find that refreshing, especially when you're watching them all in a row and you're at part 5. Getting something a little bit fresh and different is rewarding. It's welcome. So I'm going to give it essential because I find it to be fun. And we're going to just go ahead and stop there and just say essential. Okay, Howling 6, The Freaks. And this is where, I was already new territory at this point watching these. And this is where I really expected the series to take a nosedive. But to my surprise, it did not. This is the one where it's set up in a circus setting, a circus with, a freak show. And there's a werewolf rolling into town. He's kind of a drifter werewolf. And he's your protagonist. Once again, we've got the werewolf in a positive light being the protagonist of the movie, because he's facing off against a vampire who's running this circus. And now we've got what part 2 was really hoping to get, which is vampire lore in this mythology. Once again, the fresh take mythology, no previous entries matter in this situation. And it's really kind of great, especially the vampire. The guy that got playing the vampire is fantastic. He's chewing up scenery. He's really having a blast. And Vampires versus Werewolf is generally always fun, and they're doing this really well here. They've got some pretty good makeup effects. They're shaking up this formula again, keeping it from getting stale, keeping it interesting, keeping it fun, and it really is fun. The characters, the freaks, if you will, in there are pretty fun and interesting. Again, the makeup effects look really good. The characters are likable. The ones that are supposed to be likable. The villain is pretty fun and mustache twirly in a good way. Once again, it's leaning into the campy aspect of this to its benefit. And again, just fun. Feels like another fresh entry in the series, giving it life. You think you're going to keep getting the same thing over and over again, but you don't. And it keeps you on your toes, and it's really welcome. Again, in a marathon format, seeing these movies take on a different aspect or a different tone or a different idea rather than rehashing the same thing over and over again is very welcome. This one of the funnest of the series, in my opinion. So definitely, I'm going to say essential viewing. Howling 7, New Moon Rising. This is where things come to a grinding halt. This is where, once again, they're doing something different, but they're not trying to break continuity. They're trying to tie continuity back in to everything. They want part 7 to tie into part 4, part 5, part 6. And like I said, these movies have very different mythologies. They've ignored the previous entries. They aren't really set in the same universe, because if you try to put them in the same universe, it doesn't really make sense. And so now you've got a problem where you've taken the previous entries, which were all standalone films and felt pretty fun, and then you're trying to put them all together and you're kind of ruining it a little bit. But that's not the only thing that's wrong with this. This movie is boring, boring, boring. It is bad. The production is bad on all levels. The cinematography is bad. The script is bad. The acting is bad. The location's bad. Everything about this movie is bad. It's basically a love letter to this town, Pioneer Town, where they filmed it. The director just loved this town, decided to hire all the locals to play themselves, and just let them hang out and drink beer and cut farts and tell jokes and line dance and play music. And that's the thing. This movie's like Room level bad, like The Room, but without Tommy Wiseau. It really is a slog of a movie. Like I know that some people think this is really so bad it's good, but I quibble with that, man, because unless you find country music and line dancing hysterical, I don't think you're going to find this funny. I think you're just going to find this tedious and dull. This movie is awful. It's like ranking up there as one of the worst things I've had to sit through, honestly, because even though I've seen worse movies, production wise, whatever, they didn't like make me hate myself as much as this one did. This one is absolutely a not essential. In fact, I would strongly advise you to avoid it. Don't believe the hype that it's so bad it's good. It's just bad. It's just boring and painful and really kind of tries to ruin the stuff that came before. So not essential viewing, skip it, please. Okay, the Howling Reborn or Howling Rebirth. This is the other one that I confused with the one I talked about previously, part five. And this one is a reboot of the series. This one comes out much later. This comes out in the 2010s, and it's basically again once again starting over, and it's much more modern. It's got a modern aesthetic. It looks good. It's got production values that are a little bit more in line with what you'd expect today. It's got some really strong, likable leads, people I recognize from other shows and stuff like that. And it's got a central romance. It's very Twilight-esque. And honestly, this movie, I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the actors. I enjoyed the concept of this, this young man finding out that he's actually a werewolf and kind of having the pack wanting to bring him in and stuff like that. This one won me over, but it might be because I had just watched part seven, New Moon Rising, which was awful. And so I admit that my opinion this one might be colored a little bit because it's a lot better than the previous entry, right? Even though it's got some really bizarre stuff in this, like the whole thing is like it's set up in high school, and this is a high school that literally like locks down with like steel doors closing and things like that when it's closed, and they can't get out of the school. What? That doesn't make any sense. But I was having a good time with it. Again, kind of campy fun. It's not a particularly good movie, but I'm having fun with it because it's just kind of silly, and I was rolling with it. And honestly, the energy was so much better than the previous entry that I was happy to just not be in Pioneer Town anymore and not have country line dancing going on anymore and just have actual werewolf action, which was actually pretty good. Pretty good effects, pretty good everything. Not great CGI and stuff like that, but again, felt refreshing compared to the previous entry. So again, it gave me life and breathed life into the series for me. But because it's a reboot, because it's not very good, and because I'm probably a little biased in this, even though I like this movie, I'm going to say non-essential. You don't need to see this one, and I think the reviews of it, people's general opinion of it, not very high. So go ahead and skip this one too, even though I personally had a good time with this one. Okay, so that's our evaluation of the Howling franchise and which entries are essential viewing versus which ones you can just skip. And honestly, this series is better than I'd expected it to be. Like I said, I'd seen maybe about half of the series before I started my marathon of it, and I was pleasantly surprised that I had a lot more fun with this than I was expecting. It's campy fun, right? The movies are basically anthology style for the most part, and I think that's part of why it makes it work so well is you can just watch any of them as a one-off. And if you don't take them too seriously, you're going to have a fun time with them. At least I did. And so I really enjoyed this franchise quite a bit, and I was glad you guys voted for it. Now, I want to be clear in terms of all the franchises that we've looked at in the previous years, this one's going to be pretty low on the list. I'd say all the other franchises I'd probably enjoy rewatching more than this one. And that's because while some of these are a lot of fun, most of them are not great, even though they're campy, good fun. They're kind of still so bad it's good kind of style things. And aside from the original one, none of them are really amazing or fantastic. And the lows in this series are very low. The really, bottom of the basement. Whereas the lows in some of the other series we looked at are not nearly as bad as the lows in this series for sure, especially that part seven. Whew. And yeah, so just to recap, I'd say one, two, and three are definitely essential. Five and six, I'd argue, are essential. You can part two is a little questionably essential, but I'm going to call it essential. And you can skip four and seven and eight, especially seven. So that's the essential viewing on that. But again, while this kind of tracks my rankings or my personal preference for these movies, for the most part, I think the only one that I said is not essential that I actually liked was part eight. I'm going to go ahead and just give you my rankings on this because it's fun to do, frankly. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know how I'd rank them from ones I like the most, the one I like the least. So my favorite is definitely part one. Like I said, it's in my opinion a bona fide classic. It's wonderful. There's a lot going on that is worth checking out, and with Dee Wallace and the special effects and the story itself is actually pretty solid. So I'd say that one is probably my favorite of the bunch. But not probably, it's definitely my favorite of the bunch, and is really the only one that for your horror education you absolutely need to see. But if you're going to explore the Howling franchise, you should check out some of the other entries too. Now, the second one I'll say for me is going to be Howling 3, the marsupials, because I really like the concept of the marsupial werewolves. I liked the special effects in this one. I liked the campy aspect of this. I think it was having a lot of fun. It was basically poking fun at itself, which made it for a fun ride. I just liked the characters. I thought that this was a pretty good blast. And again, like the whole really understanding what it is and being unabashedly unashamed of that really worked for me. So I really like the marsupials. I think that one is definitely my number two. Number three for me on my list is going to be Howling 6, The Freaks. Again, this one was a lot of fun. Werewolf versus vampire. The circus setting is a lot of fun. The makeup effects were really good. The characters were pretty likable and interesting, and it just really was another one that felt fresh and fun to me, especially at a time when I thought by this point in the series it was going to be awful and painful, and it wasn't. So I have a lot of goodwill towards that one. Admittedly, that might kind of tweak my or influence my ranking a little bit, but I think The Freaks is a lot of fun. It's one of the better entries in the franchise for sure. The number four entry for me is going to be Howling 5, and that's the one with the people locked in the castle and trying to figure out which one of them is the werewolf. And I really enjoyed the mystery aspect of this. Like I said, these characters are kind of caricature-y. They're not deep or anything like that, but their interplay is fun. I find them to be enjoyable stereotypes. I thought a lot of the dialogue was pretty funny. I thought that the interaction or interplay between them was funny. I thought that the mystery was decent enough. It kept me going and kept me trying to figure it out. There's some technical flaws with it. It is a little bit dark and stuff like that, and I wish there was more werewolf action in it. But it really wasn't focusing on werewolf action. It was focusing on mystery and intrigue, and I thought it nailed that pretty well. Once again, a fresh feel for the series, a fresh entry, made me happy. I think that one was a lot of fun, so I put it number four. Number five for me is going to be part two. Part two, again, it's so bad it's good, right? Christopher Lee in there, watching him kind of just be pained is pretty fun, but it's also kind of painful. The movie is not great. Your Sister Was a Werewolf is a great, fun title, but the movie didn't want to lean too much into the funness of it. It does, have the unintentionally funny things like reusing that Howling song over and over and over again, and Sybil Danning and her sexuality and everything like that. It's so cheesy and funny, but it's not really trying to be. It's trying to play it straight, so there's a little bit of sadness to it. The bad acting is trying to be good acting, so it's a little bit schadenfreude watching this one, but it is fun. And that's one we want to watch with friends and kind of clown on it a little bit, maybe have a few drinks, because it is a so bad it's good movie, and that's why it's a little lower ranked for me, but I still have a good time with that one. It's still fun. The next one I'm going to say for my number six entry will be Part 8, the reboot. And admittedly, not a great movie, pretty pedestrian. It's in the post-Twilight era, and it feels like it's the post-Twilight era, and it's trying to be, like Teen Wolf, the TV show, and it's kind of slick and modern looking, but I like the actors in it. I thought the romance was pretty decent. I thought the story was pretty decent. I liked the concept behind it, and maybe, again, it was just because the previous one I just watched was terrible, but I had a good time with it, but not that good a time. It doesn't beat the other entries on this. It's pretty rote. If I'm being honest, it's pretty rote. I had fun with it, but it's a little bit forgettable, and so that's why it's pretty low on this list for me. I did still have a good time with it, but it's not a great movie. Like I said, it's not essential viewing. It's just kind of mid, if I'm being really honest with you. In the seventh spot, we're going to go with Part 4, The Original Nightmare, which I did not enjoy. I thought this was pretty dull. It's basically, like I said, a retread of the original, and pretty bland and boring. I didn't need to see it, and I was kind of mad at this movie. I'll be honest with you. I felt like I was having my time wasted, and I've read the book, so I thought, oh, well, it's going to be closer to the book, and I really felt like that was not really true. It really didn't do anything new or better that the first movie didn't already do, so it felt like a waste of my time, and I was a little bit resentful of that, and so I'm putting this one pretty low. I did not like this one. Unlike the previous, the reboot that I just previously mentioned, this one I did not like. I did not like this one, and so it's not my last, but it's almost my last. But my last is so far down the line that, it's that Part 7 I was talking about. It's New Moon Rising. I already told you about how everything in this movie is awful. I was mad watching this movie. I was angry watching this movie. This movie really irritated me to no end. Yet another line dance musical number. Like, I was really getting pissed about this. So this one, like, got very ill will from me. This one is definitely by far my dead last. It's so far, like, in my number 8 spot, but can I put it in, like, my 80th spot? It's pretty bad, y'all. So that's my rankings for the Howling series. Honestly, more good than bad. You got to have the right sentiment, the right mentality about this. It's just kind of a fun, campy series, and if you can get behind that, You can have a really good time with this, but skip the ones I told you to skip for sure. Save yourself that trouble. It's really just not worth it. The pain is just not worth it. And speaking of worth it, let's go ahead and answer a Trivia Pursuit card and hope that it's worth it. Hopefully I won't embarrass myself asking a question on this channel and then trying to answer it. This is a tradition as well where we try to answer this question live on camera. And we're going to go with, of course, the monster category because we're talking about werewolf movies. And here's our question. In 2002's 28 Days Later, what is the longest possible length of time it can take a person to succumb to infection? Okay, so off the bat, I don't actually solidly know the answer. I'll end up taking a guess. I don't know the answer to this. I'm not honestly a little bummed that we didn't get a werewolf question. It would have been really kind of cool and serendipitous if we got a werewolf question. But we're getting a zombie question, and that's fine. And we've talked about 28 Days Later on the channel, and the recent 28 Years Later just came out not too long ago at the time of this recording. And it's a good series, man. I really like those movies. And the first one in particular, it made it on the syllabus. It's a lot of fun, and I've seen it multiple times. And so I don't know the answer to this, but I think I have a pretty good guess. It's talking about the maximum amount of time it takes to change, right? And I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It doesn't take too long for the changes to happen in this movie. So I have an idea of what I want to say, and I don't I don't know for sure. It's going to be an educated guess, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. If I'm being honest with you, I feel pretty good about this one. But it's kind of one of those questions, like either you know this one because you remember it from the story, or you don't, right? Like, and you're just gonna be taking a guess like me. So I'm gonna say go ahead and lock in your answers. I don't need to prattle on too long about this one. Go ahead and lock in your answers. I've got mine locked in. So ready? Okay. So I'm gonna say 60 seconds. The 60 seconds is the longest it'll take to turn into a zombie or an infected, because it's not really technically a zombie movie. Blah blah blah. But I'm gonna say 60 seconds. So that's my answer. Final answer. And card says 20 seconds. 20 seconds, so much faster than I was actually thinking. And yeah, in my experience, or in my memory, the movie is, the transformation is super, super quick. And so 60 seconds just felt like a nice round number in my head. 20 seconds actually sounds a lot more accurate based on my, remembrance of the movie. So I got that one wrong, and I was feeling kind of cocky or a little assured about that one, but I was wrong. What did you guess? Let me know what you guessed in the comments below. Also, let me know your rankings of the Howling franchise if you've seen it. Let me know the rankings of the movies that you think. Which ones you think are best, and which ones are worst, and which ones you think are essential viewing, and which ones aren't essential viewing. Because I'd be curious to see if you guys are having as much fun with the Howling as I am. I had a blast with it. If you haven't seen it, I've already told you, I think you should check it out. So those are my thoughts on that. Thank you very much for hanging out with me. Thank you very much for another franchise evaluation that we had this year, and for voting for the Howling. Next year, we're going to do something like this again. But until then, we'll just say, class dismissed.